Okay guys, of course as we progress further into the test, it's going to be a little more challenging section by section. Okay, so let's replay again, or let's replay and then play and pause. Okay, let's now take a look at number one. Take note guys, number one has to have two answers, which means if you miss out one item, you won't get a mark. There are no half scores in listening, no? So let's listen one more time.
Dr. Ran?
Oh, come on, Elliot. Thanks for sending me the draft of your extended essay. Now, you're writing about captive breeding of endangered species, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this isn't a bad first draft, but there are some issues I think we need to discuss.
Yes. I wasn't sure if I'd done enough research before I started writing.
I'd say you've got plenty here.
So he said, I'm not sure if I have enough research, and then the teacher said, I see you have plenty here, so it cannot be letter A. This cannot be the answer, alright? Insufficient is the opposite of plenty, so it's not a problem.
Too much in places.
Too much.
You've got this very long introduction on factors threatening the survival of species now.
So, very long introduction.
In the future, for instance. It's interesting, but it doesn't address the main issue of this essay.
It doesn't address the main issue. Let's listen further.
Oh, I thought I needed to give supporting evidence for my ideas.
Yes, but only for key ideas.
Only for key ideas. So therefore, his evidence is sufficient, too much in fact, so it cannot be letter F, right? Let's listen one more time.
You can't cover everything.
You cannot cover everything.
You've got to focus on the area you've chosen.
You've got to focus on the area you've chosen. So therefore, it's not narrow, it's actually too broad, because she told him to focus on one area only, so it's not therefore letter D. So what is the answer therefore, the first problem that he has? No, this was given later, it was the very first problem. It's actually, he included irrelevant material, too much information. Irrelevant material, okay? That's the first problem. It's letter E. Let's listen further. What's the second problem?
Which is the breeding of endangered species in captivity. Now, you have lots of relevant material about that, but I think you need to look at the planning of your central section again. At present, it's all rather a jumble.
Planning of the central section, because it's all a jumble, right? It's lacking organization, right? Good. So therefore the answers for number one are B and F. Isang point lang yan. Walang one half. Yes. It's all or nothing. Unfortunately, Jovel, that's not going to get a point because you have to have both or nothing. Okay, let's now check number two. Okay, diba? I told you earlier the clue is the word introduction. So let's listen.
Oh, you mean I need to write it all out again?
Well, it's just a matter of moving the things round a bit. Your introduction needs a rethink, as I said.
Rethink?
Why don't you just begin by saying what captive breeding is?
Give a definition.
That's right.
Give a definition. The answer is definition. Sir. That's number two. Okay. And then from there, discuss something about the advantages and disadvantages.
Then you should make it clear which are positive points and which are negative ones.
Okay.
For example, you start with the fact that breeding endangered species in captivity may be the only way we have of preserving some from extinction in the years to come, which is clearly an advantage.
Number two.
Now, what other advantages did you mention?
Well, the whole thing about zoos.
The whole thing about zoos, sabi niya,
that since they're the obvious places for captive breeding to take place, this could justify their role in the future.
This could justify their role in the future. So therefore, the answer is what? Role is function, right? You will give a new role to whom? The zoos. The zoos, why? As of yet kasi, zoos are just there to showcase the animals. But since the animals are there already, why not go a little further and give them a new role, give them a new function? This is the new function, captive breeding. Zoos are the next way to go.
They're not just a place for people to go and stare at animals for fun. And then there's the point that captive breeding eventually allows the animals to be reintroduced to the wild again.
Wild.
In theory, at least.
Right.
If I suggest this time.
So put those points together. Then the disadvantages.
Well, the point that these programs are very expensive.
Expensive.
Or if you just wrote expensive, correct. Yay.
Obviously. Then thinking about the animals themselves, the psychological effects of captivity.
Yes. And you also had a good section on the problem of disease for animals in captivity.
Problems of disease. Okay. Baka makahawaan ang mga hayop in the zoos. So that's your number 5. Okay? Alright guys. Now let's try out the second set. Can I erase this one? Okay, so guys, here is section 2, set 2. In this set, guys, you'll be listening to both talking about these 5 items over here, okay? Now, your goal is to determine whether these 5 items are A, a B, or a C. In other words, you have to classify them. So the question is, what does Eliot say about the following factors related to the release of captive animals into the wild? Are they very important, A? Are they less important? Or are they C, no data, meaning cannot be determined because there's no data to indicate that it's important or not important, right? So what you do therefore, guys, is listen as they talk about each of the 5 items here one after another. So keywords again. For example, number 6, training in survival skills before release. The keyword here is training. Number 7, provision of food and shelter after release. Keywords are food and shelter. Food and shelter is very important, less important, or cannot be determined. Number 8, employment and education in the local community. Employment and education. Is this again very important but less important, or again cannot be determined? Number 9, watch out for medical screening. And number 10, watch out for the words acclimatization. Some sort of a tongue twister here. Can you say it? Acclimatization. Acclimatization. To acclimate means to adapt, to get used to the environment. So for example, in your first few days here in New Zealand, you adapted to perhaps the cold, the way people interact, the language, you acclimatize, meaning you get used to it eventually, right? So let's now listen and get the correct answers.
Now, your next section's on requirements for successful release of these animals into the wild. I think you need some evaluation here. Which of these requirements are more important?